Hi, this is Kirby. It is a patron-only podcast. Today is Friday, January 24th. You know, here's the thing. We've all heard about nannies who are taken advantage of by their very famous bosses, but very few of these women actually step forward and give a detailed blow-by-blow account of their encounters with their very famous employers. However, we've heard from some of them, right? We've heard about Arnold Schwarzenegger's tryst with the nanny, with it resulted in the birth of a child, which he kept hidden under the nose of Maria Shriver, which is remains to me a mystery since the child looks so much like Schwarzenegger. However, today we're going to talk about another secret affair that was happening under the nose of Sienna Miller's back. And that would be what happened with Jude Law. Now, about Jude Law, I want to say that Jeffrey Epstein clearly had a connection with Jude Law. We know that Harvey Weinstein and Epstein had a close connection slash friendship slash arrangement. And what you may not know is that one of the women who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell during her trial, I believe at the end of 2022, was in fact given a small role in the movie Alfie. Now, I've spoken about this before. I'm probably not going to name her right now. If you have a question and you really do want to know her name, just put it in the comments and I'm happy to oblige. So, Jude Law had been married before he met Sienna Miller. Sienna Miller, by the way, is another person who's worked for Leslie Wexner, and she did so by modeling for Abercrombie and Fitch before she became well known. Sienna Miller is, along with a list of many other people, including a chain of well, you know what? I'm not going to go into that because that's going to be a whole nother, probably veering off too much. However, she worked for Mike Jeffries, who at the time was CEO of Abercrombie, who was selected by Leslie Wexner. However, Jude Law had already been married by the time he met Sienna, and they were living together. Now, they hired a nanny for their children from his first wife, Jude Law's first wife. The children were between the age of 2 and 8 when Daisy Wright was hired in 2004. Now, she was 32 years old. I'm sorry. He was 32 years old at the time that Daisy Wright, who was 26, uh, was hired to take care of the children. So, according to her, they embarked on a passionate and highly charged affair, having Wild S 3 times during the first night they were together. And she's very candid about the fact that they were even caught in bed by one of his children and that she feared that they were falling in love. Now, this is a delusional woman. I'm sorry. Jude Law is not going to be falling in love with you. He's only having free sex, convenience sex in the privacy of his home. But sometimes the so-called other woman, even when it's a nanny who should know that if there's an S advance toward her by her boss, that it should just be considered what it is. You are just convenient flesh. No, she believed that they were falling in love. But she, unlike other nannies, kept a diary. Uh, and she was interviewed because she published her diary. She gave it to a journalist, and this became public. And in the interview, that she gave the Sunday Mirror. She said it was amazing. And at that time, it was an exclusive interview with the Sunday Mirror. And then she talked about how great of a lover he was and how he made her whole body tingle. But Jude's ex-wife, Sadie, has told Daisy, who kept a detailed diary, that she was no longer in need of her because, of course, the children told their mother that they had found her in bed with daddy. Okay, so in response, Jude then promised Daisy, who found herself without a job, that he would indeed help her find a new job. So Alfie uh first made his move on Daisy the day after she arrived in America with one of his children. So his other two children were on holiday in Spain with their mother, Sadie. So Sadie, who was divorced from Jude, but that was sort of like in transitional period when they hired the nanny who told everything, um, found another found another person nanny to take care of her children. However, she got a $6 million dollar settlement, and I think this was in pounds. So, figure out that difference. So now this was one day after he meets this woman. So Daisy writes in her diary, we went out and had a great time at a concert. We had a few beers and we got a little bit drunk. Then after the show had finished, we got invited to go back to stage to meet Robert. I'm reading her words, so maybe she's not writing correctly. So they went to a Robert Plant concert, okay, in Biloxi, Mississippi. And then they were invited back to the stage to meet him and the band. And she writes, we went to their dressing room, had wine and pizza with them, and chatted. By then I was feeling rather jolly. Jude was having his picture taken with various people. I stayed on chatting to members of the band, and Robert took my phone number because he was doing a show in London and said he would love to invite me. Then, as we were about to start the 2-hour drive back to New Orleans, I asked Jude if I could have a bottle of wine for the journey. At this point, I'm already thinking this woman has a drinking problem. And I'm not really blaming her. This is not victim shaming. It's just seriously, she wants a whole bottle of wine for the trip back. So clearly liquor and consuming large amounts of liquor is not new to this woman, and she has just been hired to be their nanny. Okay, so now she's armed with 2 bottles of wine and some takeaway pizza, and she climbs into the chauffeur-driven limousine with Jude, who's sitting there with one of his children who's already asleep in the back. And she continues in her diary, we were on such a high from the concert and the wine was being knocked back appreciatively. Jude and I started talking about the kids and his work on a level of friends, I suppose, not just employees. So again, she's misinterpreting the fact that she works for this man and his soon-to-be ex-wife. I'm going to continue. I suppose as I had a drink, I could let myself go, and so could he. He also told me how difficult it was to live in the public eye. He said, I may be Jude Law, but at the end of the day, I am an ordinary guy. We got back to the house and said goodnight to Jess, the driver, and when I came back down from the loo, this woman writes a lot, doesn't she? She talks about, private things, even going to the loo. I mean, I myself was a little surprised when I read her diary, but anyway, Jude was putting music on and opening another bottle of wine. We sat listening to music and chatted and chatted and chatted so freely and openly. He told me all about his marriage to Sadie, his relationship with Sienna, how he missed the kids, and we spoke about me. He said how wonderful he thought I was. We said how similar our outlooks and parents are. I said to Jude, I didn't understand why he didn't find a wife who didn't want a career and to party all the time. He said, it is very hard to find a woman who wants this and that, and he would love that more than anything, but there aren't women like that in his line of work. He said I was very special to want that, and it was an amazing way to be. I jokingly said, I'm free and available. hello. I mean, if that is not a welcome, and look, yeah, Jude Law is a really good looking man, but seriously, personally, I've been with a lot of really good looking men in my life. I have never come on to one of them. I mean, it's just you know, you just don't. I mean, I don't know. Okay, but I'm going to go back to her diary because this is diary of a nanny, right? A very private diary of a nanny that later became not so private. We drank our drinks, listened to music, then Jude got up. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and I said, and he no, and he said, I must go to bed. I said good night and thanks for a lovely, lovely evening. He walked round behind me, leant over, and gave me a beautiful kiss on the lips. He said, if you are lonely, come and see me. I laughed and said, don't be silly. Then he said, no, seriously, it's a big house and you might get lonely. Daisy recalls, the next thing I knew, he was kissing me. It was amazing. He felt so lovely. We kissed and kissed for what seemed like ages. I was thinking, I cannot believe this. Jude Law is snugging me. He seemed to snug me for hours. It was just a beautiful kiss, which lasted about 10 minutes. It was just so beautiful, so passionate. I was sitting on the sofa and he was kneeling in front of me, cupping my face in his hands and kissing me. It was the best kiss I've ever had. The next thing I know, we are dragging each other upstairs to his bedroom, kissing, and then in the bedroom, ripping off each other's clothes. We threw ourselves onto the giant bed and ripped off our remaining clothes. I wanted him so much. We kicked off our underwear, and before I knew it, he was inside me. It was mind-blowing. He was holding me tight and we were kissing. It was amazing, wonderful. Jude smelled so manly. He told me that I was wonderful. I could feel my whole body tingling. It felt so lovely. We explored each other's bodies intimately and gave each other pleasure. Afterwards, he lay on top of me, stroking my face. He is a great lover and knows how to satisfy a woman. And then reading from her diary, Daisy adds, then I think he started feeling really guilty. He's just said, oh God. I felt a bit sad that he had just used me for a shag. He cuddled me and asked if I was okay. I said yes. After a while, I went back to my room but couldn't sleep. I really wanted a hug. This woman is delusional, I'm telling you. She just meets this man. He kind of acknowledges that, oh, he got a little bit carried away with the moment, but she needs a hug. And this is the first night in his house. Okay, I can't help but to comment on this diary that I am reading. Okay, so, oh gosh. I really wanted a hug, so I climbed back into bed with him. We had more lovely sex, then fell asleep in each other's arms. However, at dawn, the slumbering lovers were discovered by Jude's child who came into the bedroom. Daisy says, the next thing I knew, I heard the door open and the child was looking at me in bed. I was probably still drunk and opened one eye. I just thought, I am not going to wake up. I am not going to move. I just lay there. Jude woke up and the child said, Daddy, to see him, but excited I could see him looking at me every now and then. I really feel like I am falling in love with him. That day, on some other occasions, Daisy was mistaken for Sienna on the set. She recalls someone said to Jude, is this your lovely fiancé? He said, no, this is my lovely nanny. I was really flattered. The following day, Jude stayed home with Daisy and the children. She recalls, I just watched him from the window thinking how great he was with his kids. He's a fantastic and devoted father. We all played together in the garden, and that night Jude had arranged for me to stay in the Guggenheim Hotel so that I could have a rest. I really wanted to spend the time with him, but he told me to go off and enjoy it. The hotel was beautiful, and it was lovely to climb into the deluxe bed, thinking of Jude. Daisy spent the next day having treatments and returned home that night before going straight to bed. The following day was Jude's last on set in New Iberia. before they were due to return to New Orleans. It was also the day when one of Jude's children, who we have taken the decision not to name, was to reveal what they had seen on the night of their first encounter. Daisy says, I was getting the child ready for bed when I was hit with the bombshell. The child said, Daisy, why? When we were in New Orleans, when I came into Daddy's room, you were tucked up in his arms. I was speechless. I thought, oh, F. When Jude returned home from filming, Daisy told him what had happened. Jude told me not to worry, and we went to our bedrooms, said Daisy. Later, I walked into his room in my pajamas, and we ended up making love. He said, I feel so close to you. You have become such a good friend. Mind you, this is only 2 or 3 days after she was hired. And this is what he's telling her. And she is, again, delusional, sorry. We fell asleep together. I really wanted to ask what was going to happen between us, but didn't dare. We both said how sad it was we were going back to England. The entourage returned to New Orleans with Daisy and another nanny looking after the children, and Jude busy filming. And then on April 9th, they all went to the French Quarter Festival. Daisy wrote in her diary, Jude was being hassled everywhere by fans. We listened to great music. Jude and I drank beer and went home to get ready for the film wrap party. The children, Daisy and a second nanny, all went to the party. But Daisy was able to stay later while the other nanny took the younger ones home. Both Daisy and Jude quaffed wine, and she danced with the crew. At the after party, they drank more before stumbling into Jude's chauffeur-driven car home at around 2 o'clock in the morning. Daisy recalls with a giggle, we were so drunk. Everyone was asleep upstairs, and we just kissed and kissed at the front of the house. She wrote in her diary, it was so beautiful. He makes me feel so lovely. I think I'm falling in love with him. We went inside with our beers. We were chatting about us and the holiday, and how sad it was all coming to an end. He pulled me onto his lap and kissed my neck. We looked at each other, and he said, I think you are so beautiful and special. You are far too good for me. I didn't really know what to say, so I just said, I probably am. The couple began tearing at each other's clothes. They stumbled into the game room and fell onto the pool table. Daisy wrote in her diary, we made love on the pool table amongst balls and cues. It was very funny. We laughed and laughed. She told the Sunday Mirror, that was one of the best nights of my life. I will never forget the balls flying everywhere around us. We were really drunk and went to our separate beds and passed out. But Jude wanted more. Daisy wrote in her diary, the next thing I knew, Jude was climbing in bed next to me, kissing me and saying he didn't want to go. And then I heard one of the kids coughed and told him to go back to bed. The next day, Daisy was due to fly back to England with the children. Jude said his farewells on set in his trailer. He gave me a big kiss on the lips, which shocked me, and we hugged, said Daisy. However, I was a bit sad on the plane because I had fallen for him. I suppose, I'm sorry. I just that I know what's coming up, and I suppose he hoped he would ask me to marry him. A little stupid dream, I know. Why would someone like Jude Law want little old me? So this woman believed, literally, that after a couple of days of knowing her and having had taken advantage of her, frankly, he works for her. She works for him, sorry. That he's passionately in love. He's in the middle of a divorce from his first wife, is connecting with Sienna Miller, and suddenly she feels that he's going to ask her to marry him. Okay. So then Jude, all right, so then after, and this became a big scandal for a millisecond. And then after it became a scandal, she said, well, I deeply regret doing this now. I had no idea it would turn out the way it did. Doing that story looked so tacky, and it was portrayed as though it was just a fling. Well, honey, it was just a fling. And still, even after the fact, she is thinking that they are a couple. And then she says, and this is the end of this thing, she says, what is so hurtful is that, sex aside, I thought that Jude and I had a friendship. But once the rumors began that we'd been having an affair, he dropped me like a hot potato and terminated my employment with him. I feel very betrayed. I'm curious to hear if any of you ever even heard about the nanny scandal involving Jude Law, and how you feel about the nanny herself and her delusional belief about everything that happened. All right, guys, I hope you're having a good day. And again, I look forward to your commentary. Bye.